My name is John H., and I'm an alcoholic. I'm also a drug addict and a compulsive gambler. In this Code Blue Big Book Study in Action seminar, we're going to go through the recovery section of the Big Book line by line, and we're going to do the action that our book tells us we must do to recover from the seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. This is based on the Canadian method used by the Golden Slippers, but I also borrow a lot of information from the Joe and Charlie Big Book Weekend tapes, as I feel their interpretation carries so much depth and weight. Sometimes I use their material verbatim, so don't get angry at me. Sometimes they can say things a lot better than me. This action and study is designed so that you can follow along in a 4th edition Big Book. Have your pen and highlighter ready. I don't claim to be any kind of big book guru or top 10 spiritualist. I'm just a simple drunk who was almost dead from the disease when a group of my heroes, some recovered alcoholics, took me through the book 5 years ago and saved my life. There's also some paperwork that you can download. Hopefully I'll get that online as well. Some from Joe and Charlie and some from the Golden Slippers. Please forgive any mistakes, errors, or misquotes you may detect. I'm sure there are many, for once again, I'm just a simple drunk trying to help other folks as I was helped myself. Thanks for listening. All right. I'm John. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, John.
During the 1950s, a man by the name of Max C., now deceased, started a group in Winnipeg, Manitoba called the Golden Slippers. The group was a back to the basics of the big book kind of group, especially for those people who could not stay sober for any length of time. The group took a bunch of chronic slippers and walked them through the steps, taking the action exactly as laid out by the first 100 men and women who wrote the basic textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not your typical thanks for sharing kind of AA meeting, nor is it like any seminar. Participants are asked to do all 12 steps as laid out in our basic textbook. One or more of the people who have done this work before will be guides to lead you through the instructions in our basic textbook using a dictionary published at about the same time as the book Alcoholics Anonymous to help us better understand the directions as they were written by the first 100 men and women. We ask every participant to commit to the entire process. Though we read and study the AA Big Book, this group is not limited to members of AA. We who have participated in these groups before have come to understand that these sessions make us much better sponsors. We can now lead people through the steps exactly as given to us by those who have gone before, unfettered and unchanged. In addition to being a boot camp for sponsors, we also feel this is especially valuable to those who have been through some sort of treatment or rehab and have been, in effect, left off at step 3 or step 5. Recovery requires that we do all 12 steps. We recover in AA by taking the steps, and if we don't take the action as described in our basic textbook, we might not recover. The study and action sessions will guide you through the steps precisely as the first 100 men and women laid them down. These are back to the basic sessions, accepting the simple kit of spiritual tools that's been laid at our feet. And I just want to let everybody know I also steal some information and some stuff from the Joe and Charlie Big Book study, so I kind of combine it with the Code Blue format. Let's open with a set-aside prayer. God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. Amen. All right, if there's a couple of new people, you'll get to know that prayer and hopefully write it in the front of your book. Okay, guys, so and there's a couple of new people. This is typically the last week that I think people should come into this. The first week, we looked at the history of the book. The second week, we looked at what the problem is, right? That's the doctor's opinion. The obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body, right? And the third week, we read Bill's story, which is a classic example of somebody who has the problem, what happened to him, and how he was able to recover from this condition. So today we are on Chapter 2, There is a Solution. Now, we've got just a ton of stuff in this, so we're going to be doing a lot of writing and a lot of highlighting. There's just tons of information in this chapter. However, I paid $17. Yep, I've had a lot of coffee, and if I'm going too fast, just say, hey, slow down, because I want to make sure that you guys get everything. So we are at Chapter 2, page 17. There's that first word again, we. I want you to circle that first word, we. And then above where it says chapter 2, does everybody have pens and everything?
I have a problem.
You need a book?
I'll buy one, yes.
Here, give them this one right here. There you go.
$10?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so we are chapter 2. I want you to circle that first word, we. And at the top of the page, please write, this is not a me program, and put me in parentheses. Right? I used to think it was a me program when I first came in here. I'm the most important guy, right? This is not a me program. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Highlight this little sentence. Nearly all have recovered. Right? There's that word again, recovered. Our book is going to tell us that we can recover from this disease. When I came in here, I couldn't stop drinking, I couldn't stop using, and I wanted to kill myself. I have recovered from that horrible condition. Right? I'm never cured. I'm never cured. There are things that I have to do to keep in fit spiritual condition, but I have indeed recovered from that condition. So next to that, write twofold disease. Off to the right, write twofold disease. Obsession of mind, allergy of body. Obsession of mind, allergy of body. Okay, our mind is going to tell us that we have to drink or it's okay that we drink. And once we do drink, the allergy of the body is going to kick in and we can't control how much we take. Right? So we can't stop drinking because of our mind, and we can't safely drink because of our body. We have become absolutely powerless over alcohol, and or drugs and gambling, whatever it is. They have solved the drink problem. Underline the word solved, right? We have an answer, and they're going to tell us what that solution is in chapter 2. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. Highlight the next little sentence. We are people who normally would not mix. Now that's kind of funny because they're talking about the first 100 people who recovered. I think it was 96 men and 4 women, but mainly they were middle-aged white men, right? That is very prophetic because when you go into AA meetings today, you are going to see people from all different stripes of life. So that's very prophetic, that statement. But there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. Okay, we're going to highlight this next sentence. We are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. So what Bill is talking about there, in the 1930s, the major mode of transportation were the great ocean liners, right? So if you're in Europe and you want to book passage to the United States and you don't have any money, what you're going to do is you're going to book passage in what's called the steerage section. That is at the very bottom of the ship. There's no fresh air. There's a dormitory style living, maybe 2 people per bunk. There is, the food is pretty bad, but you could get to the U.S. for very little money. If you had a little more money, you could go 4th class, and if you had even more, 3rd class. If you have more, you get to 2nd class. 2nd class, you get your own room for your family, you get a little bit of fresh air, you get better food. If you have a lot of money, you can go 1st class. 1st class, you get staterooms, you get the finest food, you get plenty of fresh air, you get people waiting on you hand and foot. But if you have the right kind of money and you have the right kind of religion, you will be invited to the most elite place in the ship, which is to dine at the captain's table, right? So, and these people, they wanted to keep them separated, right? So they even had separate stairwells in these ships, so the people in the steerage section would not run into the people at the captain's table or the 1st class, right? Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. The feeling, highlight this next sentence, the feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. So I think Bill is talking about the Titanic here. And once they hit that iceberg and people ended up in the water, It did not matter if you were from the captain's table wearing your tuxedo or if you were from the steerage section wearing your old work clothes, right? It did not matter. Once you got pulled onto that life raft and you got taken to shore, you're hugging, you're laughing, you're dancing, you're singing. It's just indescribably wonderful that your life has been saved, right? But once these people get to shore, they're going to look at each other and they're going to say, you know what? We really don't have anything in common. Been nice knowing you. See you later. And they'll never see each other again, right? Now, we here in AA, when we escape from a common peril, we still have that same feeling, the greatest feeling in the world. That's the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And here in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're actually going to stay together because recovery binds us together. So we don't care who you are. We don't care where you come from. We don't care how much money you have. We don't care what level of education you have. We don't care about your ethnic background. We don't care about your religion. The only thing we want to know is, are you an alcoholic? Right? That's all we care about. So recovery is going to bind us together. But that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. Now, Bill is talking about two great powers that are going to help us to get sober. One of them is the fellowship, the meetings, the coffees, the cookies, the sober softball, right? But the common solution that they're really talking about here is something different. That is going to be the vital spiritual experience, the spiritual awakening, the personality transformation that we are going to get through working the steps. And he talks about it right here. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. Circle common solution. Okay? We, and again, every time you're reading we, it's the first 100 people who wrote this book. So let's highlight the next sentence too. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree. Okay, right next to that, we're going to write working the steps. Working the steps. And upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. Circle that word action. Because they're going to tell us in this book that we've got a lot of work to do, but if we do the work, we're going to get that spiritual awakening and we're going to be able to recover from this disease. So let's highlight that last sentence there too. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. So it's the news of the vital spiritual experience. It's not the news of the fellowship, right? An illness, and again, if I'm going too fast, slow me down. An illness of this sort, and we have come to believe in an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him, and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all those whose lives touch the sufferers. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. Okay, so next to that, off to the left, we're going to write rock bottom. Right, rock bottom. And right after it says increase the list, write family disease. Right? We're the alcoholics, but my gosh, what we do affects everybody in our family. It affects everybody we work with. It affects everybody we know, right? So it's not just our problem, man. It's everybody that we know. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. Okay, we've got those squiggly lines, so whenever we see that, we know that's an important statement. So we're going to highlight this next paragraph. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, right, the spiritual awakening, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. And again, guys, this is how we sponsor people. This is the way I was taught. We take them through the book. We're gonna have them highlight the stuff we do. We're gonna have them write the notes we do, and we're gonna have them take the actions that we're gonna take in Code Blue. And our book is telling us that we alcoholics are going to be the only people that can go out and save others who are dying from this disease. Right? That's on us. Once we have worked the steps and we've had this spiritual experience. But the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about, that his whole deportment, his deportment means behavior, shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. So at the top of the page, let's write something. Okay, we're going to write actions first and our minds follow. Right? We've got to take the actions. We've got to bring our body. We've got to do the work. Actions first and our minds follow. Our minds, we alcoholics, are always catching up with what we do and where we take our body. So we're going to do this work, and somewhere in the middle of this work, we're going to say, my goodness, I am not the same person. I am different. None of us makes a sole vocation. Vocation is a job or a career of this work. Nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. Okay, we're going to highlight the next 5 lines. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. Okay, a much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. Okay, all of us spend much of our spare time in that sort of effort. You can stop highlighting there. And when they say all of us, again, wherever it says we or all of us, that's the first 100 people who wrote that book. That's not us today, right? That's the people who wrote this book. The sort of effort which we are going to describe. So somewhere, I would like you to write right next to what we just highlighted, practicing the principles at home and at work is the harder part. Right? Practicing the principles at home and at work is the harder part. You know, when I first sobered up, I found that I went to a meeting every day. I found that I could be a very nice fellow for that 1 hour a day, right? The harder part, practicing the principles at home and at work, is the harder part. And that's what we're going to learn to do when we work these steps. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all their time to the work. Okay, so you can write off to the right. First year and a half, Bill did this. All right, Bill W. So the first year and a half, Bill was spending all of his time trying to do this sort of work with a still suffering alcoholic. If we keep on the way we are going, there is little doubt that much good will result. But the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given us? We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume. So underline anonymous volume, right? And that's obviously, you can write this book. That's the book we're reading. An anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. Okay, so right next to that sentence, I want you to write, all 100 had to agree before writing it down, right? So Bill Wilson was the primary author, but he would send chapters and pages out to the other members, and they would all have to agree to it, and they'd recommend changes and corrections, and they would all have to agree to it before it was going to be set down in this book permanently. So all 100 had to agree before writing it down. our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. Let's underline those 4 words. And right next to them, you can write 4 balances of well-being. 4 balances of well-being. Right? We are aware that these matters are, from their very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which contained no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Okay, we're going to highlight the next 3 lines. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings. Okay, so the shortcomings, that another term for that is defects of character. We're going to see that as we work through the steps. He uses the same, different words for the same meanings. Other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. Okay? So let's highlight this next sentence. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others. Okay, underline constant and draw a little arrow, right? Not occasional, right? Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. Now, my sponsor he knew me well when I came in. Next to that sentence, he had me write tall order for a selfish prick. So if that applies to you, you can write it down. It certainly applied to me when I came into these rooms. You know, constant thought of others. Are you kidding me? And how we may help meet their needs. You may already have asked yourself why it is that all of us became so very ill from drinking. Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, underline, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. There it is again. We have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, underline and highlight, asterisk, what do I have to do? Okay, what do I have to do? It is the purpose of this book, highlight, to answer such questions specifically. So they're going to tell us exactly what we need to do to recover from a hopeless condition of mind and body. And once we have done that, and once we've had our psychic change, our personality transformation, we are going to be uniquely qualified to go out and to help other people. Right? And you know, funny enough, we can't go from step 1 to step 12. We've got to work these steps. We've got to have that awakening, and then we're going to be uniquely qualified to go out and to help other people who are dying. You know, like I was, like many of you. What do I have to do? It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. We shall tell you what we have done. Right? Under done, right? Not thought. Right? It's what we've done. You know, people think I can think my way out of this, right? Well, no, we can't. We've got to take actions. We've got to take actions. Before going into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. Okay, so right here, we're going to make a note off to the left. Okay, you're going to write the word action, and then write ask sponsee here, do you want to stop drinking? Right here. And I want all of you guys to ask yourself, do you want to stop drinking or do you want to stay stopped? Right? So right here, you're going to ask your sponsee when you're out there sponsoring in a couple of months, do you want to stop drinking? Right?
For how many times?
It's right next to what do I have to do? Right in here.
Okay.
Right? Do you want to stop drinking, right? And then if he says yes, well then we're going to say it's the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically, right? And we shall tell you what we have done, or you're going to say I'm going to tell you what I did, right? So it's right in there. Do you want to stop drinking?
Whereabouts is it?
just right across from what do I have to do. Just right here, just anywhere in this area, you just ask your sponsee, do you want to stop drinking? And hopefully he or she is going to say, yes, I do. And then you're going to say, well, this book is going to answer that specifically, and we shall tell you what I have. And I'll tell you what I did, right? Not we shall tell you what we have done, because you will have worked the steps. Now, obviously, if somebody says, well, I don't really not sure if I want to quit drinking, maybe there's somebody out there who really does want to quit drinking. We've got to be willing. Before going into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. How many times people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone, why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fella can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him if he ever drank again it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. Okay, so right next to those statements, right, doesn't work for us. Doesn't work for us. And then also write, people who don't understand alcoholism. Right next to all of those statements that I just read. Okay, now we're going to look at 3 types of drinker, and these statements are going to be said, they're going to refer to the first 2 types of drinkers that we're going to talk about, right? Not the real alcoholic, because the people who say that kind of stuff, they don't understand alcoholism. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. Highlight. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. So right after ours, write, not alcoholics. / don't get it. Not alcoholics / don't get it. So we're going to talk now about the 3 types of drinkers. Okay? So highlight moderate drinker, and next to it write type 1. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. Okay? Highlight, they can take it or leave it alone. Then draw a little line through under, they can take it or leave it alone. That's type 1. Remember, when we went through the doctor's opinion, moderate drinkers, they get home from work, they're tired, they're wrought up from the day, they have a couple of drinks, they get a slightly tipsy, out of control feeling, and they say, that's it, I don't want to have any more. They have dinner, and then maybe watch TV and go to bed, right? They don't want any more. That's the moderate drinker. They can take it or leave it alone, right? So those guys are the ones that are going to say, you guys can stop if you want to too, right? Next is type 2, under the line we drew, okay? And type 2. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. Highlight hard drinker, or heavy drinker, if you will. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. That sounds good, right? It's only going to chop a couple of years off his life. Highlight, if a sufficiently strong reason, just that little bit there, if a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warnings of a doctor, then highlight again, becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate. Okay? Although he may find it difficult and troublesome, and may even need medical attention. Okay? We see these guys all over the place, right? They're hard drinkers, and they say, I had some friends. John Henry, when I was in the Navy, I used to get drunk. I used to get thrown in the brig. I drank. I was an alcoholic in the Navy. But when I got out of the Navy, I got married. I started going to church. I had kids, and I quit. Okay? Right? No, these guys are not alcoholics. They do not have the obsession of the mind or the allergy of the body. They're heavy drinkers. And they think, hey, just because they can stop, they think that we can too. Right? So now let's draw a line under medical attention. And now next we're going to put type 3. Type 3. But what about the real...
Medical.
Underneath, draw a line through the whole page. And we're going to write the third type of drinker, which is the real alcoholic.
Right before, but what about the...
Yep, right above, but yep, draw a line across the whole page there, and underneath it write type 3. So there's 3 types. There's the moderate drinker, there's the hard or heavy drinker, right? I drank this, I was an alcoholic, but I stopped, right? And then there's, but what about the real alcoholic? Highlight real alcoholic, and then write type 3. Type 3. He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. Okay, highlight to the end of the paragraph. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Okay, so next to that, we're going to write crossing of invisible line / physical allergy. Right? Crossing of invisible line / physical allergy. Right? Once we remember, in the doctor's opinion, we saw that once we take alcohol into our body, it creates an actual physical craving for more. That's the physical allergy. Hard drinkers don't have that. Okay, crossing of invisible line / physical allergy, right next to what we just highlighted. Now we're gonna get some descriptions of the real alcoholic, and think to yourself if any of these apply to you, right? Here is the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. Underline, he is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Underline that little phrase there. And then to the right, you can write Robert Louis Stevenson, RLS, if you know your literature, Robert Louis Stevenson, 1819, when he wrote it. And he was an alcoholic, right? So we've got to think whether or not Robert Louis Stevenson was writing about himself, right? Because he was an alcoholic. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. Highlight, next sentence. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. Circle must. Right? Now remember Bill Wilson in his story. Remember when I told you he worked for a matter of months on that deal, and a few days before it was going to be successfully completed, Bill started drinking, and the allergy kicked in. He couldn't stop, and he blew that whole deal. Right? He lost 3 months worth of work. He is often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor. But in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. Only an alcoholic would say that about himself. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. So next to all of this we're reading, you write, can you relate to any of these descriptions? And I want you to ask yourself that, but you're going to ask your sponsee when you're working with them. When you go through these, when you're working with a sponsee, he goes, oh my God, yeah, I just got hired for that new job and I didn't drink for 3 days, and then a day before got my first day, I started drinking and I didn't make it. I mean, you're gonna see if you can get the person you're working with to relate to any of these descriptions. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around. Yet early the next morning, he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. I mean, I used to hide my drugs, I used to hide my booze, I'd have stuff hidden all over the place. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Highlight, then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. After sanitariums, you can write treatment in parentheses, right? Goes by a different name these days. And again, you're asking your sponsee and yourself if you can identify to any of these. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description should identify him roughly. And you know what? Even if, today, because AA has become so well known, we get a DWI and the judge sentences us to AA. Many of us are getting into these rooms before we have to reach the bottoms that the people who wrote this book reached, right? But believe you me, if you're an alcoholic and you keep drinking, sooner or later, these things are going to happen in your life as they happened in mine. Okay, so now we're going to highlight down to Water Wagon. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? Okay, so right next to that, we're going to write obsession of the mind. Remember from the doctor's opinion, obsession of the mind. That's why he can't do it, or she. What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. Highlight, we cannot answer the riddle, right? They don't know why. They don't know why 10% of us are different. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once, highlight to the end of the page, once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. So next to that statement, we're going to write allergic reaction. Allergic reaction, okay? And now at the bottom of the page, and we're talking any alcohol, so at the bottom of the page, write rum cake, NyQuil. Remember last time I said NyQuil comes with its own shot glass. Rum cake, NyQuil, and for me, man, I almost died. It started innocently enough. Pills from dentist. So, whenever I go to a doctor or a dentist or anything else, I say I am in recovery. I'm an alcoholic. And I let them know that up front because I don't want them to give me anything. I had a bad cold last year, and I stopped at that little place at Target, and I talked with her, and she, oh my gosh, and she had already written me something out, and I said, oh, by the way, I'm an alcoholic. She says, oh my God, and she ripped it up. She had given me a cough syrup with codeine in it, and I mean that for me being a pill popper as well, that would have been horrible. Virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. So at the top of that page that we're on right now, 23, write worry about the first drink. Big letters. Worry about the first drink. That's the one that's going to kill us. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Highlight and double underline this next sentence. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. Okay, I'm going to read that again. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. We can't do anything about the physical allergy. Remember, we talked about that during the doctor's opinion. Nothing we can do about that. So the only way we are going to beat this disease is by attacking it in our heads. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Okay, now remember, we are always stone cold sober when we take that first drink, right? Or if you're anything like me, stark raving sober when we take that first drink. So next to that paragraph that we just read, you can write explains mental obsession. Explains mental obsession. You know, I mean, I'll never forget when I was 6 years old, I stood behind one of the older kids in our neighborhood, Craigie Gardner, and he was showing me, he just got a new set of golf clubs, and he wound that baby up and he swung. I was right behind him, and that golf club slammed me in my face, and that hurt me worse than anything had hurt me up to that point. And I can tell you that from that time forward, I have never had a strange desire to stand right behind somebody who's going to take a golf swing, right? But I have gone out and started drinking over and over. Just got out of jail, DWI, gone out and drinking, right? Just crashed my car, gone out and drinking. Just had a girl leave me, got out and drink, right? Over and over and over I did it when it came to booze. So stark raving sober is when we got to be careful. Now let's highlight this first little sentence here. I love that. Once in a while he may tell the truth, right? And the truth, strange to say, is that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. You know, one of my sponsees, I love it. He told me right before I started working with him, he said, the last straw was I made up my mind to quit drinking forever. Right? That was in the morning. And by the time he got home that afternoon, he was sitting out on his deck drinking. He was on his second mixed drink when all of a sudden he remembered that he had quit forever, right? No explanation. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time. Okay, underline the next 4 lines. But in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady, circle malady, has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game. Okay, so right next to that, the obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game, right? Insanity of the disease, right? Doggone it, I haven't had a drink for 3 months. I'm doing pretty good. You know what, man? I think that this time, if I just keep it to 6 drinks, I'm going to be okay. This time, it's going to be different. This time, the same thing is not going to happen again, right? And we fool ourselves and we start drinking, right? And then, a month later, we have something else. Say, oh my gosh, this time it'll be different, right? But it never is. But they often suspect they are down for the count. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal. But everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy, morbid drowsiness is a good definition for that, and assert his power of will. This time he's got to stop, right? This time she'll never pick up again. I know it, right? But unless we do something, that happy day is not going to arrive. So let's highlight the next 2 lines. The tragic truth is that if the man or woman be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. Okay? At a certain, we're going to be highlighting the next 3 lines of the next page too. At a certain point in the drinking career and the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. Remember when we talked about the doctor's opinion, we said willpower does not work when our brains tell us there's nothing wrong with taking that first drink, right? And our brains will do that. Now, at the top of the page, and we'll explain it later on, right? My own memory does not keep me sober. Why would your war stories? And I'll explain that in a little bit. Right? But we just got out of jail last week, and I remember the cops cuffing me and slamming my head down, and my own memory does not keep me sober. Why would your war stories? Okay? And this has to do when you're sponsoring or when you're in first step meetings. Passes into the state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. So we may have crossed that invisible line long before we think we have. Okay?